Welcome to the Tank Podcast. In this week's episode, Stephanie Sy-Quia talks to poet Bhanu Kapil. They discuss archives, art making and natural talent versus individual practice.
I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of yours. I don't know whether you read the piece that I wrote in the White Review.
Yes, thank you. I think I was in the States when I read it, and quite a unique experience for me to have such a proprioceptive account, belated yet timely. I learned so much from your writing, and it just helps me to start to think about my identity as a writer in this country, perhaps. So thank you so much.
Stephanie, that wasn't what I was fishing for. I mean, that's very generous of you. But I suppose, it was for the White Review, which,
yes,
in recent days has announced that it has a very uncertain future.
Yes.
And through various, quirks of like changes in editorship and stuff, I had much longer than I suppose I would have normally to kind of sit with your work and work on that piece. And it went through several rounds of edits. And in the past couple of years, it was one of the pieces that I've sort of had the most deep, sustained thinking on, which was really enjoyable. So it was just such a pleasure to sit with your work and try and do so in, to a degree of profundity.
Oh, sure, Stephanie, thank you.
So I suppose one thing that actually, the first thing I want to ask you about today is your preoccupation with sort of peritexts or paratexts. I'm thinking of your acknowledgements in Ban and your notes on schizophrenia, for instance. And I was just wondering if you could tell me more about that. What I see as a big preoccupation of your work, that often in schizophrenia, the text is its own beast, and then the notes tell us more about the text, but it felt as if actually what you were trying to say was quite unusually weighted towards the notes.
Thanks for that question, Stephanie. In fact, that's the question that I imagined being able to ask you, prompted actually by your use of the word beast next to notebook. What is a hybrid possibility for a book that might be described by others as poetry? So to think through the notebook, Ban on Banlieue in particular was written into my blog, initially called Was Jack Kerouac a Punjabi? And then I think it was Reading Fred Moten in the Cherry Orchard, and then it became The Vortex of Formidable Sparkles. So I was part of like blog culture, you could say. This was 2010, and Kate Zambrano, Frances Farmer was my sister. So there was a whole world of like cut price, kind of low tech cut price in the sense that you didn't have to pay anything. All these ways that many of us were writing in a kind of notebook form. So if I have to think about like what it was to put that work together from so many notes and so many blog posts, what I actually recall is not the overwhelm, but the magnitude of this notebook life. So I think it was 2012 or 2014 when I began to have some, pressure, or the pressurized quality of organizing the materials. And so I remember there was a butcher's block that my neighbor Peggy had left on the curb. And I just sort of hauled it in, washed it up, and sort of stacked all the notebooks in the trays of this kind of butcher's block with the vegetable racks underneath, I suppose. and I can really remember being in my home in Colorado, and I can remember that I had about 4 days, which was sort of typical for Ban, and before that, schizophrenia. I usually had like 4 days a year when my son was with his father or his grandfather or grandmother somewhere. And it was the only 4 days in a year that I had like completely, you could say, to my own biological life, my own rhythms. And so I'm trying to recall, it was just a matter of like my big dream of opening the notebooks and transcribing them and letting them set up their own life. That did not come to be in those 4 days. And so I just reverted to bibliomancy. And reversion is the wrong word. It just felt appropriate. It felt impersonal and intense, a combination that I like in writing or in developing the tone of my work. And I sort of, I remember that. I remember my fingertip. I remember the butcher's block. And I think I called it butcher's block appendix. And then much of the rest of the work was, just almost not indifferently, but there was so much material and there remains so much dormant or inaccessible or real or ephemeral, versions of Ban. And this just happens to be one of them. And I think the reason I feel proud of that is that I really, for myself, feel that the book is not the same thing as the work. So what is flowing through and what is kind of a chance operation of editing or organizing and also deleting at the last moment. A little bit, I've begun to consider the embodied water of my archives, whether digital or paper. And I'm wondering, how long does it take for a book to evaporate? Schizophrenia, the process was a little bit different, but I find that I don't kind of write in order to find out what I'm thinking. I still don't know, which is why I appreciated your white review, essay or account. And so the paratext is a chance to think differently or think with, or to place value on life as it's actually lived, as a writer, scraps, fragments, and to let them orbit the void of the work.
Yeah, sorry, that's just reminded me of something that Hilary Mantel wrote that I love about sort of, what we call history and what history actually is. Mm-hmm. Which I just want to find. I love that idea of the work is the work, it's not the book. Because I've finished a big writing project that's been a long time in the making, and I keep having doubts about it and thinking, well, have I done enough research, or should I have tried to get into such and such an archive? And then I think, no, this is the thing I wrote, and it was hard enough as it is, so I'd better try and stick with it.
Maybe I can ask a question, Stephanie, there. I'm just thinking about like the present moment, like connections between archival thinking and like poetic reality, or the book of poetry and the archive. And I'm really interested in that sort of like, if I'm catching it correctly through this Zoom affect, like just as a sort of, not exhaustion, but like, is there a way that the archive like deflects the possibility of crossing its own threshold? Like, it's a lot to traverse and kind of make and remake, and to think internally, like with an archive, like that's another like 2 or 3 years. Do I catch that tone correctly? Or I'd like to learn more about like, what's that moment when we think, well, maybe I should have gone to the archive, but why didn't we? And why do we keep our water, the water of our bodies, outside it, which is to kind of implicate the archive as imperial space? Question mark.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think part of not of resisting, I suppose, the standard call of the archive, the fact that we kind of see going to the archive as a legitimizing act that legitimizes our project and our endeavor. When I say we, I guess I mean other people.
Poets.
Yeah. For me, I guess I was worried about how the archive might distract me, what it might throw into my path that I then felt duty bound to pursue, and actually that it might take me off the path that I was that was very hard to discern as it is, but I actually don't think that going to the archive would have made it any easier. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you boil that answer down, that's saying, I was worried about like finding too many other exciting things to try and pursue. But
and maybe that is, back to composition and the last moments, just before a book becomes an artifact. And when you began to speak about like the project that's completing now, I had like a glimpse in my mind of a perimeter, or just like I don't know why, but just a perimeter path came into my mind. I think recalling or reflecting on the reading I heard you give in the horse hospital where we met in April or March, or one of those months earlier this year. So that evocation of the text as covalent or kind of fluxing with the barely discernible path, or the path that's barely discernible as it is. It's really beautiful and sounds right to me. Yeah, and maybe paratext and just the kind of flutter book or randomness is a way to reduce the dominance of other ways of recording or vivifying lived time. Yeah.
Well, I suppose I mean, I wonder, do you find writing hard? Because I like that idea again of, the book is actually only evidence of the way in which you kind of battled your way through a set of ideas that you thought about over a certain period of time, and you could have done it in many different ways. And so the book is actually, it's just the sort of series of scuff marks left from how you crossed from one place to another, which I have now found the Hilary Mantel quote, which I really like, and I just want to read to you. Evidence is always partial. Facts are not truth, though they're part of it. Information is not knowledge, and history is not the past. It's the method we've evolved of organizing our ignorance of the past. It's the record of what's left on the record. It's the plan of the positions taken when we stop the dance to note them down. It's what's left in the sieve when the centuries have run through it. A few stones, scraps of writing, scraps of cloth. It is no more the past than a birth certificate is a birth, or a script is a performance, or a map is a journey. It's the multiplication of the evidence of fallible and biased witnesses, combined with the incomplete accounts of actions not fully understood by the people who performed them. It's no more than the best we can do, and often it falls short of that.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's beautiful. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Hilary Mantel. I was rehearsing on Tuesday in a chapel at Churchill College last week before a performance on Friday for Prototype, I guess, at Burley Fisher Book Festival, run by So Mayer. there we were, grimy, sodden, chilled to the bone, trying to kind of go through our performance, myself, Blue Pieta, Yasmin Rai, and Nina Harris. And I went to the loo, and when I closed the door, I saw that the scuff mark on the wall resembled half a dragonfly. This was mesmerizing, and I thought about this dragonfly smudge as we moved through our experience. And later that day, I went for a walk with my mother, and I'll send you the photograph or the video afterwards. Maybe it can be incorporated into our session. But it was a dragonfly, just stationary, but also fluxing on a blackberry briar. So there's something about the smudges and the scuff marks and the traces. And as Hilary Mantel says, not just the imprint, but a kind of luminous or occult embroidery, an embroidery consisting not of thread, but of light upon the imprint itself. Suddenly I'm thinking of Francesca Woodman's photographs, developed or taken or staged when she was a teenager in Boulder, Colorado. So I like that idea. I like it, and I suppose I live it in the sense that I'm really curious about what it is to build a work up from remnants, traces, but also to really analyze those traces, or what I might call the detritus of a performance, in order to study its incarnate possibilities. So that's language that comes from Tibetan culture or Tibetan Buddhist culture, the ring cell, the charnel ground, and the same is in my own sort of variant of sub-Himalayan, bone pit analysis. Also, just the idea is you study the weather, you feel the air on the night or the morning after someone has passed from this earth, in order to consider where they went, I suppose, or who they were, or what it is. And that to me is like, the way that you asked your question in the beginning is writing hard. It's hard if I'm just trying to kind of write on paper, or to I suppose type, but it's not hard if I just ground myself and develop the relationships with materials, and then use those materials to striate, to break up the ground of the work, which is both solid and void, and then to kind of work from there. So perhaps that's a way of thinking about performance and installation or ritual, all of the ways of making or pre-making or preparing oneself to do the thing that we're calling the work, that then becomes like very close to life itself, like the body, life, writing. And it's not so hard then to switch into other modes of, let's say, caregiving or parenting, to think of like my destiny as a writer as, a single parent, and now caring for an older parent with my sister. But, there's never enough time or space. And it's not that I find difficult, or the thing that's difficult is to move between the different parts of life. And so to kind of write in the middle of the life, in the garden, or like on the floor of the living room, or in bed, like all of this makes it feel more possible. Don't know if that made sense.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I similarly, I used to care for my grandmother, excuse me, and that felt, I mean, she had a stroke and then she had dementia, and neither of those things were identified at the time, but with hindsight I can sort of see the onset, well, certainly of the dementia, but it sort of felt as if my personhood as an individual person was kind of neither here nor there, because she needed help with a lot of things, but she could be very imperious, and she got me mixed up with my mother, who's an only child, and there was just this sense of being folded up with all the other generations, and actually my sort of femaleness and my youth were only really of a certain use. And I mean, caring for her was very fulfilling for me. It continues to be something very important to me, and I think it always will be. But I remember that feeling of my writer self feeling a bit imperiled, and then working really hard to reclaim it and protect it, and realizing that it's really only down to me to have a writer self and make sure that it's kind of nurtured. And I think also because I took a really long time to take myself seriously as a writer, that again felt like quite a sort of a bit of a rescue mission. But I completely understand what you mean about kind of jockeying between different modes and that making it quite hard, because I think some of the best writing I've ever done, I've done whilst I was like chopping a vegetable or something. Actually, like, I think it's really important to have a sort of fully embodied practice. So much of Amnion, for instance, was written when I was walking around, and there are so many different versions of the text which are just hovering out there somewhere because I never wrote them down. I came up with some great lines that I forgot to write down, and so they're just lost to the ether. And so again, Amnion is really only the record of what I wrote down.
I love that. I love your walks on winter and spring mornings, and I love this. I love this idea of the books that are hovering, or not possibilities. That's the wrong way to say it, but to whom aloud, aka poems to the like inside yourself that you wrote like that on your walks.
Yeah, and I suppose that felt like that was itself a self-nurturing practice, right? Because it was, I wasn't so focused on preserving it. I was just letting the ideas appear and then go away again, I guess, as practice.
Yeah. And maybe just kind of like haunted a little bit by the archive, and thinking that maybe it's precisely that instinct not to preserve that kind of moves in a different way to all of the boring or coded or very interesting or kind of durable acidic content of the archive. So really like that, like, how do we make a space in our works for elements that can't be preserved? And maybe that's a way of thinking about extinction, and thinking also, no, I don't know, it's just the beginning of a thought, but I really like that.
Well, thank you. I realized that we're going to run out of time on this Zoom call. So once we do, just hop back on the link and we'll do like an extra, whatever it is, 15 minutes, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, another question for you.
Can I ask a question just quickly?
Yeah. You ask away.
You said that nurturance and this kind of cultivation and care for your identity as a writer was up to you or down to you. And I just wanted to pause there and ask a question about community. It struck me when you said that, and I was wondering, or I'm curious now, switching between modes of different kinds. We've talked about our duties and our identities, perhaps, as women. I'm not sure if that's the word that you used, woman or women, but also like moving between countries or territories or terrains, and that kind of remember, forget, and the forming of identity in different places and the lag. And I'm curious about like the way that migration figures in your own formations towards like hybrid works, but then, yeah, what other communities and what other times that nurtured you beyond what you had to do for yourself?
Well, I mean, the communities question is probably easier to answer than times and migrations. In terms of community, the Ledbury Critics program has, yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a lot, but it has really, I think I joined that program at a time when I was very, very uncertain about what I was trying to do as a writer. You know, I'd just gone freelance, and I had done that from a position of not really knowing anyone and not having that much experience. So I was very scared, and I was very worried about money, and the fact that I was really scared about money actually gave me a lot of energy to sort of go out there and, you know, be a bit scrappy, I guess. But anyway, the Ledbury Critics gave me, I mean, on top of helping me with, you know, networking and resources and advice and mentorship and all those tangible things, it also just really validated my sense of vocation. And that was a real, yeah, that was just the wind in my, it's been the wind in my sails ever since, I would say. And the people I've met through Ledbury, you know, someone somewhere, I think probably our beloved Sandeep and Sarah, Sandeep Parmar and Sarah Howe, are excellent judges of character, because with so many of the people I've met through Ledbury, there's just been that instant feeling of like recognition and ease. So, you know, some of my dearest friends I've met through that program. And even if I, you know, we live all over the place. So even if I don't see them that frequently, you know, we just pick up where we left off, and it's just so nourishing to be in their company. And also it just turns me into quite a different version of myself that I don't think I could sustain full time, because I am by nature a very sleepy creature. But I mean, when I'm with the Ledburys, yeah, I sort of want to stay up all night talking about Claudia Rankin or, you know, whatever. And that's really, really fun and really sustaining.
Good. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm just I'm meeting you for the first time or the third time or the second time, and that's part of being a poet, isn't it? Like you pretty much will know each other, Stephanie, until I am 74 and a half, which is, I don't know, not very good at mathematics, but 20 years from now, 30 years from now, if you are writing poetry and I am writing poetry, then we're likely to still know each other. That relation or that community lessens or fades when we stop. And so I really love a conversation about what it is, not just to survive, but to sustain the life in which the writing is made possible.
Yeah. And I think it It ranges, of course, from a set of extremely material considerations to more emotional ones. And I think I've got the emotional ones like pretty, they feel pretty good right now because, you know, I feel as if I have found my people. But then, you know, for instance, I'm a part-time teacher in a secondary school, and that's really fun, but it's really hard to do that and all the other stuff that I'm trying to do. So I think I've done a good job of, you know, being a teacher who is on time and does her marking in a timely and efficient manner, but it's come at the expense of everything else that I'm trying to do. So that's tricky again, because it feels like, you know, the writer self needs to be protected a bit more.
I was gonna found, and I forgot all about it until now, but this went on for years. I was going to found something called the Hanuman Institute, and it would be like writing, but also like healing things. But it would be about, it was going to be some transdisciplinary, like hot springs spa writing retreat for writers of color. But I forgot about it until right now. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, so I have one more question or two more questions, depending on how much you think we can fit in. The first is, what is it like coming face to face with things you wrote a long time ago? I mean, incubation is about, well, it's almost 20 years old. So yeah, but you know, now that your older work is being reissued in the UK, what does that feel like?
Well, I will say that at the time that my books were first published in the US and small press culture, nothing happened. There was no launch, there were no reviews, there were no readings. It was just a different culture and a different time, I suppose. So it's sort of a new experience. This is the first time working with prototype that I've worked with anybody who, Rory Cook in this case, who in this case, who like works with publicity or, you know, the kind of like care and attention to launching work. These are new experiences for me. I'm in my 50s. Even for my first book in the UK, How to Wash a Heart, I think it sort of came out during the pandemic. So really that's in the editing and having to kind of read and attend to sentences and syntax in a linear fashion, and parallel in the United States, I found like really arduous, and to really pull myself together to think of it as a chance to come to the intense present, and come to the intense political present as well. I think I didn't enjoy it very much, and actually, you know, this book made sense because it was out of print for almost 8 years, I think. But when I was invited to, you know, there have been various invitations or possibilities to republish my back catalogue, zero interest in that. I don't mind vertical interrogation of strangers being reprinted in Argentina or Finland or, you know, Italy, like all of these other places. That's okay because it's like £76 that comes into my bank account for the latest Argentinian version, and it's so unlikely that I will ever encounter those readers. Unlikely because of the way that I'm living at the moment and the lessening of my desire to show up for a 20-minute reading halfway around a planet that I live upon with others. So yeah, it's sort of repulsive, but also very moving in the case of working with prototype. That's been amazing, but only as a chance to kind of create these relationships and a community around performance. And these are portals to belonging that I did not expect to know.
Yeah, that's such a
combination, Stephanie.
Yeah, such a beautiful way of expressing that relationship. My last question is, how do you feel about the influence that you have over others? I mean, your work is adored by so many and is so influential to so many, and how does that make you feel, and how do you bear it in mind as you continue to make work?
Stephanie, I'm only now at this stage in my career that was never a career, like really, in the sense that I never received a grant or any funding to write. I never had a fellowship. I never had any leave from my work. I may have applied for grants, but I never got them. So literally until the age of 50, nothing much happened. So I think it's like this moment of returning to the UK that I'm quite moved to encounter myself as an elder, but without perhaps some of the experiences of being a younger writer or a middle-aged writer that maybe go along with experiencing the status of an elder. So developmentally, I feel like still in a state of surprise, or I don't know. It's quite it is a surprise to find myself occupying the outline of a writer who's writing other people read. And what I appreciate the most is the way that people come up maybe after a reading and express what reading a particular work meant for their writing. And I love that informal, orphatic like moment after a reading. And I love my blog for that. I got millions of postcards and like bars of chocolate from rancid South Asian teenagers, as I once was, like from their apartments overlooking, I don't know, a parking lot in Sydney. And all of that I loved, and it still comes in through the books. But I've been thinking about how to return to social media or to return to blogging. I have like a Substack set up. It's called Punjabi Dracula, a blog in bite-sized form, but I haven't written a post. I've just finished writing a short novella that no one will ever read called Promiscuity, a Novel from Life. I just finished page 60, actually, just before we spoke, and that is unpublishable. So I'm trying to come up with a venue that would allow me to create ritual and performance around the book as something that will never be anything, around a book that can never be read, precisely because it can't be published, and the possibilities of building community fire around an occasion like that. Or I need to found the Hanuman Institute. If anyone is watching this Tank TV special and would like to become the benefactor of this institute, the Ledbury Collective, Stephanie, everyone we know, we're just we're obsessed, and please help us. We want to be in the hot springs. We want like one of those swimming lanes that kind of recirculates the waves. We want to preserve our loneliness at all costs. So yeah, those are my ideas, Stephanie. I know you have to go swimming, great. So
yeah,
thank you for this interview. That was also a meeting and a chance to remember, for me, the barely discernible path, and a reminder to just keep breathing and walking and
chopping vegetables.
Chopping vegetables. I'm going to go right in and just peel some beetroots and roast them with onions.
That sounds amazing. Well, it was
Stephanie.
lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for all of your brilliance. And I hope our barely discernible paths cross again before too long.
I hope so too, Stephanie. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.